What's up, everyone? Welcome to another exciting episode of Acceptable Accuracy with Tyler and Phil. I am one of your co-hosts, Tyler.
And I'm the other co-host, Phil.
Or Philippe. Or
Philippe.
Hollywood.
Or Philip.
Or Dutch Bullfrog.
Felipe.
Oh, Felipe. There we go.
Felipe.
But either way, so welcome to another exciting episode of Acceptable Accuracy. And today we're actually going to be touching on a topic of something I know little to nothing about other than everything that I hear from Philip. And that is why we're going to be doing this. So today will be part 2 of our 2-part series of our Suppressor series. Last week, we had Kyle and Levi on as we spoke about the importance of a suppressor and why even get a suppressor. Today, we'll be going into the steps of actually getting a suppressor because I need to get one. Phil's done it. So now I'm basically going to be asking him a bunch of questions of how to get a suppressor. So Philip, is there anything you want to add before we get into this exciting episode about suppressors, part 2?
Yeah, I would like to add that we are not lawyers. So take everything that you hear from this episode with a grain of salt. It's weird that I have to even say this, but it's just a little CYA on our part. However, like Tyler was saying, I have gone through this process before. I suffer from being an IT professional, which means that I research the crap out of everything. And as such, I did the same thing with when I bought my suppressor, which was a few years back. Thank you, Fox, for providing the cash to do that.
That's awesome.
That is a story for another time.
What if I identify as a lawyer like Mike Ross?
I don't know who Mike Ross is. But
You've never seen the show Suits?
No.
Bro.
I only watch good Christian shows, Tyler.
That's fair. Ironically enough, it was actually recommended to me by a pastor. So
that's funny. That's hilarious.
But
hey, pastors have lives too.
Exactly.
Yeah, anyway, just we give this kind of like warning. I guess this is the wrong word, but at the beginning of the episode because
it's a disclosure.
Is a disclosure. I'm actually going to mention in this today when we talk about it is to double check all your resources. Actually, use multiple resources, and I'll get into the why later.
Like Wikipedia.
Not Wikipedia, Tyler.
Wikipedia, please sponsor us.
Please not. All right. Anyway, I guess let's kind of get step right into it then.
So
you want to do
yeah.
first?
So of course, like you mentioned, I guess once again for full disclosure for everyone, we're not lawyers. Check your state and local laws in all. Apparently, how many states you're even allowed to have a suppressor?
So I checked before I hopped on the episode, and this was from a suppressor company. I won't say who in case they have it wrong, but it was 42 states. Honestly,
I didn't know that.
I thought it was more than that.
I thought so too.
So we're from Michigan. We've talked about that before. Suppressor ownership is legally fairly new within Michigan, maybe the past, I'm going to get this wrong, but like maybe 10 plus years. It was Governor Snyder, I think, who signed it into law, as well as SBRs as well. Prior to that, in Michigan, we were not allowed to have suppressors or SBRs, which is crazy because if you know anything about the state of Michigan, we are a very sportsman's friendly state because of all the white-tailed deer hunting and other hunting as well that goes on in the state. But apparently suppressors were not on that list. They are now. But again, check your state and local laws before you do start pursuing a suppressor. Especially, I don't want like most companies are going to find out pretty quickly where you're at. They're going to be like, I'm sorry, you can't actually buy a suppressor. But while I'm not aware of any local issues, there may be a few. I think of like Chicago potentially having limitations on suppressor ownership. I do not know. But again, the FFL or the suppressor company you're purchasing from or shop you're purchasing from may not know specifically the area that you're in. So double check all your laws first.
Yeah. So let's say I live in a state. I mean, we're in Michigan, which here in Michigan, we are allowed to, you know what I mean when I say we're allowed to. We're allowed to have suppressors here. We're one of the 42. So can I just walk into a gun store and be like, I see that suppressor. I want to buy it, and can I have it right now? Can I do that?
So you can walk into the store and say, I want the suppressor, and you can buy it, but you cannot leave with it.
Why not?
Unfortunately, we are under the law, the NFA law, which is the National Firearms Act.
But a suppressor is not a firearm.
I know that's why it's messed up.
I'm just being a bud right now,
No, no,
man.
and we actually covered this on a different episode too, where it was early
Hmm.
on, one of our earlier episodes where we talked about how it was laws and stuff and opinions on laws surrounding, like especially NFA items, because suppressors are not, uh, it's not a firearm, right?
No.
It is a accessory to a firearm. Now, I guess the argument could be made that because it's not a arm, quote unquote, that it can be regulated, right? Which I think is why only 42 states allow suppressor usage. But then some people would also argue on the flip side, which I would tend to agree with, that uh, arms, like things are attached to it, the accessories are attached to it, would also be considered part of the arm itself. Because you get down a slippery slope, right? Because then you can say things like, well, you don't have to have sights in order to fire your firearm. It is not part of a firearm. Therefore, we are going to regulate iron sights or optical sights or a scope under state law that says you cannot own one. And I hope no state lawyers who are left listen to this. They probably won't, because they'll probably be like, oh, we can do that, make it hard for people to shoot. Anyway, so going back to the topic at hand, you are required to fill out a Form 4, which is a transfer of an NFA item through the ATF. Fortunately, there are multiple ways of going about this. It's all the same form, but there are both the paper copy and the e-form, which we'll be talking most about today, because e-form is significantly faster. I have done Form 1s as well via the e-form. Those go pretty quick. And I've also, my Form 4 was actually a paper form, because when I did it, the Form 4 e-form did not exist yet.
How long did it take for you to get your suppressor when you did it in paper?
So unfortunately, the paper process took 280 something days in order for me to
That's
get my suppressor.
insane, dude. Almost a year.
Yeah, and that was very
What was
common
that,
at that
9 months?
time.
Mm-hmm.
Something
Nine
like
and a half
that.
months.
Yep.
That's insane. So how about now? We're talking about this Form 4 and online. What are people seeing now?
So fortunately, and amazingly, and I think we touched on this in the last episode a bit as well, there was somebody at the ATF who was like,
Hmm.
hey, I think we can make this process better. Because even with the e-forms being live and accelerating a lot of the processing on the backhand that cleared up a lot of the issues, or not being able to read handwriting, whatever it may be, even though that was all cleared up by using an e-form, the process did eventually continue to slow down because there were so many people using the e-form. And it went back to that like almost half year wait time. But there was somebody at the ATF. I wish I knew the dude's name. I know it is a guy. I think at one point I knew his name, but he's like, "Hey, I can make this
Was it
better."
Donald Trump?
It was not Donald Trump. He did not work for the ATF. Anyway, so somebody actually took the bureaucracy, looked at it, and said, "We can make this better." And again, we covered this in the last episode, so I'll be very brief on it. Basically, what they did is if you passed all the background checks, all the there's no mistakes in your form, any of that stuff, they would slide you through as quickly as possible. And if there was an issue with a Form 4 or a Form 1, any of the ATF forms, they would then go to another person who would work through those issues. Whereas before, the individuals would have to, that work for the ATF would have to clear that issue before they could basically move on to another case. Well, now they have another group of individuals within that team that take care of that. And that's why ATF wait times on Form 4s and Form 1s is down to sometimes sub 24 hours. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah,
I think on average, people are looking at, anywhere from 2 to 5 days to get their suppressor back
that's
if
amazing.
if there are no issues with their form.
Yeah, I remember I was at the gun store with a buddy recently, and I might have mentioned this in that previous episode as well. But he told me the employee of the store, he told me that he applied for a suppressor on Friday at like, I don't know, 3 p.m. or whatever. He got approved for it Monday morning at like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m.
Yeah, that's
So
crazy.
technically, I know that's like 3 days, but business hour days, that's literally less than 24 hours.
Well, if you think about it, while there are fingerprints required and a photo required for the Form 4 or any Form 1 as well too, and we'll get to those in a bit. Really the only slow up at this point is there's an FBI background check that has to be run on you. But if you think about buying a firearm, they run the NICS check and it's back within minutes, right?
Hmm.
So same thing I got to imagine with the background check for an NFA item as well. Because if you can own a firearm, you can own Form 4 item or an NFA item as well too.
Hmm. So, what's the difference between a Form 1 and a Form 4? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so Form 1 is basically the permission to manufacture an NFA item.
Okay.
Um, and that would include like an SBR, or which is a short barrel rifle, or a short barrel shotgun.
Okay.
And you can manufacture a suppressor. Most people don't, because the process is way different than manufacturing a firearm.
Just an oil
So,
can, right?
well, I mean,
Or
potentially
oil filter.
yes, yeah, potentially yes. I don't know enough about that side, so I
I'm
can't really get
kidding.
into
I'm
that
kidding,
and
man.
building it. But you could, if you had the capability to do so, you could make a suppressor as well too. There's no reason, nothing that says you can't. But because of the nature, the high heat nature of suppressors, and you want something durable, most people will buy one, which then requires a transfer.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, well, that makes sense. So, I guess kind of moving forward, so from start to end, what does that even look like? So, obviously, you're talking about I go to the store, I see a suppressor, or I'm even online and there's a suppressor that I want. What are the steps to get a suppressor?
Yeah, so let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. The first thing that you have to do when purchasing a suppressor is actually buy the suppressor itself.
Oh,
So
really?
it almost feels like it's slightly counterintuitive, because when you go to like buy a firearm, I guess if you're buying it online, you do have it shipped to an FFL. So you are technically buying the firearm first. Now, if you're at a gun shop, then they'll actually, before you they like have you buy it, they'll actually run the background check from you,
Hmm.
just to make sure that you can pass it, right? I'm sure there's some weird legalese and steps in there how that works out. But in order to get suppressor, you actually have to buy it, because you're required to get information off of that suppressor in order to transfer it. So things like the serial number, which would be unique to that suppressor itself, is required. So it's really messed up, because you could actually buy a suppressor, and then if you fail the transfer, like, or the NFA paperwork in the background check, that kind of stuff, right? If you fail it, you could technically own a suppressor, but not be allowed to own the suppressor, if that makes sense, right? You could never have transferred over to you.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, anyway, so what you do is you purchase a suppressor, whether that's online or in person. A lot of people will buy suppressors online. Very few shops will carry suppressors unless they're very popular suppressors. There are a few shops around town here that I know that carry them. Again, they're really well known brands and very specific models that sell really well. But typically, you're buying them online, and then once you do that, that kicks off the whole process of how you get that transferred to you. Suppressor, similar to a firearm, has to be transferred from one FFL to another. In order for that process to happen, there is that NFA paperwork on the inside. So, or that's a step that you have to do with that to get that transferred to the FFL, and then from the FFL to yourself. So there's a whole bunch of back end paperwork that one FFL works with another FFL to do to get the actual suppressor transferred, but they'll actually transfer and physically ship the suppressor to the local shop that you're going to get transferred to, which is also really weird. So if you, not to get too much on a tangent, but if you purchase a suppressor and the FFL, the company you buy it from, has it transferred to the FFL that you're going to get it from, if that FFL has a gun range, you can actually go and visit your suppressor, and you can actually shoot your suppressor before you take it home. You just couldn't leave the premises, because technically at that point, it's under ownership of the FFL until it's transferred out to you.
That's cool.
So there are places that will do that, will allow you to use it and shoot it before you can actually have it transferred over to you. So you can go visit it anytime you want. Like if you wanted to, if you had a local shop you transferred it to, you wanted to go look at your suppressor, you could just go in and hold it, but you couldn't take it out the door.
Did you do that, Philip?
I did not. At the
Why
time
not?
when I
290 days, bro.
so when I bought mine at the time, and I did mine through Silencer Shop, which, hey, I appreciate the helping us move along on our subject here. I bought it through Silencer Shop, and there was a kiosk that I did it through.
Silencer Shop, sponsor us.
That would actually be pretty sweet. I would not lie, because, and I'm going to get into it right now. So I did it through Silencer Shop. You are required to do a Form 4 no matter what you do, but Silencer Shop has taken the initiative of a process that is traditionally very painful and automated a lot of it.
Yeah.
So if you look at getting a suppressor, there are some things that are required. One of those is you have to get a photo of yourself, a passport photo, I had my wife take mine.
What do you
It's
mean by
sim
a passport photo? What do you mean by that?
So it's like, again, don't quote me on this. Look online to get these specifics, but it's like your shoulders and up on a neutral background.
Okay, so when you say passport photo, you don't mean
Hmm.
like I need to go to like Walgreens and get
No,
like an official passport photo. You mean like a basically like a style of a
correct.
picture. Okay, I see what you mean by that now.
Yeah, it's a passport style photo. Now you could go to Walgreens and have them take a photo of it if you're going to do a paper form for. If you're
Mm-hmm.
going to do a digital form for or an e form for, you want to have a actual photo of they've taken a digital copy of it because you'll actually have to
Mm-hmm.
upload it in order to get the suppressor.
Got it.
But anyway, back to Silencer Shop again. Please sponsor us. I would love it. They're fantastic to work with. They automated the whole process. They actually allow you to go into a kiosk that's at your local store, and they have a whole section on their website where you can go in, find a local kiosk, and the kiosk will actually allow you to get your fingerprints taken, which is one of the biggest pains of getting a suppressor. Because in the past, you had to go somewhere that would support the correct fingerprinting that was needed in order to get a suppressor, and that was usually going into some law enforcement office. I had to go to my local sheriff's office to get my fingerprints done in order to have them included in the Form 4, which again was a paper Form 4. Now, you can actually still do that today if you want to get paper fingerprints. You can fill out the e Form 4, and then you actually have to send off your fingerprints to the ATF, which we'll get into in just a little bit here. Anyway, so kind of wrapping up the silencer shop thing, they automated this whole process, made it really easy. Go into the kiosk, you can get your fingerprints done there. Then you would go onto their website. You could actually upload your photo right into it, and they created a process that was called full auto. That would basically go. You'd sign. Yeah, yeah, I know, I love it. You'd sign into the ATF's website. Once you got logged in, then it would basically you'd hit go, and it would process everything on the back end for you. And
Mm-hmm.
that way, everything would be in theory correct, right? And they would do
Gotcha.
things like uploading your fingerprints. It would upload your photo, and then at the time, and I don't know if they still do this, but they would actually check to make sure that the data and information was correct that you entered into your Form 4, so that if you did mess something up, they would in theory catch it, and then you fix it before you actually submitted it in. So
Mm.
it added like a day or two to the process, but it was, again, it's a little bit more something to help you sleep well at night. You can still do a normal, like there are plenty of people that do a normal form e-form 4 through the website. It just requires a few more steps to get through it. So anyway, so we kind of talked about the shop kiosk and how useful that is, but there are some things that you will need whether or not you go through silencer shop's kiosk or if you do a form 4 on your own. So I guess we can kind of step through those specific items. Again, this is not a walkthrough on how to get your suppressor, but these are the items that I wish I knew I needed in advance,
Mm-hmm.
right? And these are all over the internet too. Um, One of the sites that I used to actually, or I should say, a video that I used in order to get more information was this website that was like a trust website, and they actually have a YouTube video on it where they walk you through like step by step going through the form and filling it out. There's a ton of videos out there, so if you Google like how to fill the form e-form 4, it'll actually walk you through the whole process as well. But again, things that I wish I knew I needed before going in. Set up an account through the ATF itself. So you'll actually create an account that gets you logged into the ATF's NFA dashboard. And then from there, you actually can submit whether it's a Form 1 or Form 4 or any other forms that you need. You have one single login that you'll use going forward. So you need that. You also want to decide whether or not you want to do your Form 4 in this case, again, as a individual, as a trust, or as a corp/legal entity. And Tyler, do you know what the difference is on those?
No idea. I was hoping you do.
I do actually. Well, I was wondering if you did because I know like sometimes you deal with some legal stuff, but
No, yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, I deal with like fi- I deal with the church nonprofit side of things, which, ironically enough, a church is a 501c3 automatically. So some churches decide to actually go through all the paperwork to be a specific 501c3. Others, according to the IRS code, are already considered it. And the only difference would be if you, let's say you're like a Southern Baptist church. So then you have the Southern Baptist Convention under you. So you can actually get a lot of benefits. I don't know why I'm talking about this, but you can get a lot of
Okay.
benefits from like Microsoft or other companies to get like basically nonprofit discounts. Whereas like a church that hasn't gone, or a church, let's say like a non-denom or an independent church that doesn't, that's not underneath like a board or convention, if they don't go through the full 501c3, then then they actually cannot get those benefits. They are tax exempt automatically by IRS, but they do not qualify for non-profit discounts with some companies.
So
So weird.
if a church is a legal entity,
Yep.
could the church own a suppressor?
I
That you
don't
don't have
see
to
why
answer. You don't have
not.
to answer that question.
I don't.
But
Once again, I am not a lawyer. I have no idea, but
right.
personally, I don't see why not. Because kind of like what you mentioned, you have the difference between a individual trust, or oh, I see what you mean by, or a corporation entity. Then,
Yeah.
if that's the case, then I don't see why not.
Interesting.
The
Yeah.
church.
So I guess if you're yes, if you're
I'm not even gonna talk about that.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so okay, so the difference between like an individual and a trust, I know a little bit about just because I looked into it. As an individual, when you transfer a Form 4 item or any NFI item to you, that NFA item belongs to you and you alone.
Okay.
Whereas if you do a trust, you can actually have multiple people on that trust, and then the device, whatever it is, the firearms, suppressor, whatever it is, belongs to everyone in that trust.
Okay.
The advantages of doing a trust are that way, if you, let's say you have like you and your spouse and you have a SBR or a suppressor, then legally either one of you can be in possession of that item. If you have it as an individual, which I do, like legally I can only be in possession of my firearm, or I have to be there with an individual. Like I
Yeah.
can't have my spouse take my NFA items out of the home, right? That would not be allowed to happen, which creates some more legal issues, which we'll cover later. But again, fortunately, the trust, way back in the day, it used to be once you set up the trust and you had the fingerprints and everything on file, you could just keep adding items over and over to the trust without having to
Okay.
re-fingerprint or re-photograph everyone every time. Well, now when you go to add an item, and again, please double check me on this. We're not lawyers. Now, if you have trust, every time you add an NFA item, you have to re-fingerprint and re-photograph everyone, from what
Okay.
I understand, which is a pain, right? There are companies, including Silencer Shop, who do something that's called a single shot trust, where it's a single trust. You only use it once. You have all the individuals you want added onto it right from the get go. They support the whole thing on the back end, get all the fingerprints and everything. And then you have a single trust for that single item. And everyone who's on that trust then can use that item going forward.
Okay.
And then it's just used for that. And you can't really use it for anything else. I'm sure there's a legal way of reusing that trust, but from what I understand from Silencer Shop, I think you can only use it once.
Hmm.
Okay, so going forward, again, you want to select Form 4 in this case for a suppressor. Pretty basic, right? We talked about the passport type picture or photograph. Again, make sure that's in a JPEG or a GIF format, which is hilarious to me that they even allow GIFs, because most pop culture we look at GIFs as animated GIFs, as silly things that we share. But the government is old, and JPEGs and GIFs have been around for forever as your default file format.
I I'll admit, because I'm looking at it, I'm like, I was really hoping that was a typo.
It is not. It is not. And the fun thing is, a GIF, and granted, if it's not animated, it'll be smaller, right?
Mm-hmm.
But GIFs are usually not as good quality as a JPEG, and they also
Mm-hmm.
tend to be larger, especially if they're animated, right? I highly recommend a JPEG or
Of course.
JPG,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how you want to pronounce it, just because it's easier. And then don't accidentally save it as a PNG though, or any of the weird file formats that your phone wants to share it as. Make sure that you convert it. Most computers will allow you to convert over to a JPEG pretty
Oh
easily.
yeah. Or you can easily go to a website. You can look up like a JPEG
Correct.
converter, and it's a piece of cake.
Yep.
Or if
Again,
you have
make sure.
Photoshop, you can do that too. Hey.
Yep. Make sure your photo is cropped and everything. I can't remember what the specific dimensions are on the photo, but make sure it's correct. I don't know if it's hugely different, but again, make sure it's a good photo of you. My first photo I think I used for my I was really tired when I got it taken, and it was through the physical form 4. It was actual photo, and I look like I'm somebody who's gonna like cause trouble. Like I
Oh
look
my
like
goodness.
a ruffian, which is just hilarious. My other ones look much better.
There
So
you go.
anyway, so moving on from there, and again, this is a lot of information to digest. You can write this down. You can also find this on a bunch of sources online. But these are the things that, like, if you're in the process of filling it out, gather this information first. Your social security number, similar to when you transfer a firearm, is not required, but highly encouraged. If you have an issue where you have a very common name and you've
Like
moved,
me.
like Tyler,
I actually
um,
do have a very common
yep,
name.
and
I've looked myself up before and I found like 20 of me's.
yes, whereas mine is a little bit less common.
Hmm.
If you have a very common name, it might not be a bad idea to give them the social security number. Some people just don't because they don't trust the government, which is ironic because they're the ones that give you the social security number.
Exactly.
But
Where else did we get it?
it's a different organization that gives you the social security number. So I don't know. Some people don't want to do it. I cannot remember whether or not I did mine. My assumption is I probably did, just because I was like, well, if they really want it, they probably already have it.
Hmm.
Okay, so social security number and then the fingerprints that you need. Again, if you go through Silencer Shop, they're going to get the correct file formats for this and everything. But there's a file format called the EFT file that your fingerprints have to be in.
Interesting.
If you're going to upload them to the form itself. Again, if you choose not to upload the fingerprints, once you submit the actual form 4 itself, you have 10 days to email your fingerprints off to the ATF before you run into problems. I did say email, I meant to mail into them,
Oh, okay.
like actual snail mail into the ATF to make sure that they get it. And there's a whole process on that. They tell you how to do it, where to send it, and how to like properly address the actual letter that you send into them. But getting somebody to create an EFT file for you is pretty straightforward, especially if you go through Silencer Shop. Again, I swear, if they sponsor us after this episode, again, I'll be very, very satisfied. Okay, so beyond that, the other
How
things that you need,
satisfied.
dude,
You only brought it up like
they
four
were really
times.
easy because I actually had to contact them for some customer service stuff, and
Yeah,
they were awesome.
that's great, man.
Responded really quickly, and just one of those things where you're like, man, you guys took a pain in the butt process and made it easy.
So, what I'm hearing is, can you literally do all of this through Silencer Shop? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So the only limitations on that are you're either purchasing the suppressor silencer from Silencer Shop directly, or through one of the shops that works through them. So,
Okay.
like your lot of local shops, typically if they have the kiosk, I think they actually have the ability to order through Silencer Shop. So you're actually buying it from the local shop if that's what you want to do, and
Okay.
then they just purchase from Silencer Shop. But so that does limit you. So
Hmm.
Silencer Shop carries a, again, we're not sponsored by them right now. Silencer Shop
Right
carries a
now.
yeah, Silencer Shop carries a ton of different suppressors. They had the model I wanted. I had to wait a little bit because it was brand new. But again, because the wait times are so low right now, if you're trying to find a specific suppressor and Silencer Shop does not have it, then you're going to have to go through somebody else who may not have that easy process, and you
Mm,
may have to actually go through the form for itself. Now,
gotcha.
I don't
Okay.
know if you can go through Silencer Shop and just have them generate the EFT files for you. They're probably cool enough; they may do that, but again, they put a lot of money and time into this whole process, so they may want you to actually purchase through them. Either way, there are other solutions out there where you can get EFTs. Just do a Google search on how to get it, and then you can upload your fingerprints directly to the form if you fill it out yourself. Other items that you need to know are your FFL information. That is the FFL that you actually had the company you bought it from. So, again, if we're talking about Silencer Shop, your local FFL, you'll need that information. And then something that I did not expect and ran into that actually was surprised about was you need something called your Clio, which is your chief local enforcement or chief law enforcement officer, and that's usually the sheriff that's in your area. Again, this is why we're not lawyers. We put in the disclaimer at the beginning. You will probably want to Google that and find out who it is, because for whatever reason, when you fill out NFA paperwork, they actually send that information to the local chief law enforcement officer. Again, typically your sheriff's office, and it's actually your sheriff specifically, so that they have a record of it.
Hmm.
Why they need record of it, I do not know, but it was probably written into the law way back in the day, and there's no way of getting around it.
Because they're an elected official. That's why.
Right. Fortunately, with the e-forms, like the original forms, you had to actually mail it yourself, but with the e-forms, they'll actually mail it for you, from what
That's
I understand.
amazing.
So I know the government actually doing something for you is wild, but I think mainly because they want the law enforcement to have it, so
Yeah. Oh,
they're,
yeah.
they want to track you. Okay, so other things you need to know is the serial number, manufacturer, etc. of the actual suppressor itself, because you have to fill that out. Because you're transferring a suppressor to you, and they have to know which suppressor they're transferring for you to you, and they need to have that information on record. So again, this is a lot of information. Other basic things you need to know, obviously, your basic information about yourself, your address, your name, all that stuff, right? Those are things you just know off the top of your head. So I'm trying to cover the items that you may run into that you did not expect. Again, so once you submit all this, the ATF will process the request. Either they'll permit, deny, or they'll have to ask for corrections on the form itself. And then when the process is done, then eventually you'll get your tax stamp, and then you can go into the FFL and then get the item transferred to you. So that's a lot of information. Tyler, do you have any questions on that? Because I know, again, this is a little bit new for you as well. If not, we can.
I have a headache.
That's
That's a
not good.
lot.
I hope it's not a headache as a result of the information that I provided you.
No. I think it's a mix of all. I was like, holy cow. I knew it was a lot, but what's really cool is kind of like what you're mentioning, like you said, with the resource of Silencer Shop, how so you can do all of that through Silencer Shop. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
That's
And
insane. That's
they'll
amazing.
walk you through it. And the nice thing is basically you fill out all the information before you submit it.
And
Which
then I assume, obviously, because you are also buying from them or through them, they're making money that way. But I assume there's probably a fee as well on top of it that they charge you to do it.
uh, I'm trying to
Is that a safe
remember.
assumption? If not, it's no
I
big deal. I was just
if
curious.
if there was a fee, it wasn't very much. If I remember
Yeah.
correctly, because I did their form one. They had a form one for a while. Um, back when the whole pistol brace ban thing was a thing, they had a form one that you could do through, and obviously you weren't buying anything from them,
Hmm.
but it was completely reasonable. I think it was like $35,
Oh, yeah.
and the pain that it saves you was just insurmountable. Like, insurmountable is the wrong word, but like just undescribable. The amount of work that it saves you,
For sure.
and yeah, so it was very useful. So I actually went through that direction as well for one of my form ones. The other one I did by
Hmm.
myself, which was a pain.
Yeah. Which I mean, that makes sense. So I guess kind of all that to say now that, so you get approved for a suppressor, right? You've
Yep.
got the suppressor now.
Yep.
Now what? Are there any limitations? Are there any laws that I need to make sure I don't break? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, so suppressors are cool, and everybody knows that suppressors are cool, right?
Hmm.
Like it's next level cool item, as are SBRs. However, with anything that seems like it's next level cool, there's a bunch of laws around it.
Yep.
So, like we talked about before, when you own a NFA item, it has to be stored. Many states have firearm storage laws, anyways, but you
Thanks,
actually have
Michigan.
to. I know. So, I have my NFA items, and in order for me to properly store them, they have to be locked away so that nobody else can get them, and only I know the code to be able to access those devices. So I have a safe that they literally sit in at all times unless I am taking it to the range to use,
Hmm.
because that way nobody else in my house or somebody break in, whatever, protecting your property anyway
Yeah.
alone, right? I'm going to keep it in there anyway. But as weird as it may seem, you actually have to keep it locked and inaccessible from anyone else in your household, including your spouse, who may be old enough to legally use it, but cannot actually have access to it and actually have it within their possession if you're not there. So again, that makes it tough. And again, the ATF's not, again, we're not lawyers, but the ATF's not going to knock on your door and ask these questions, right? Usually they're going to give you a heads up, they're going to show up. Now that could change, right?
Hmm.
The ATF could decide that they want to be a bunch of jerks and they could just randomly show up, and they can legally show up at any time. And probably after this episode, I'll get a visit from the ATF, and they can inspect where all of your items are at any given time, right? To make sure that you're following all the laws. So I put that in here as a caveat. Again, make sure that you are researching this. I'm not a lawyer. Double check this. The other thing that you have to be considerate of too, and this is where things get really weird. So Tyler and I, we've talked about the Zombie Invitational that we've gone out of state to go shoot. That is in West Virginia. They allow you to legally have a suppressor and a SBR in that state. But in order for you to transfer, physically take your SBR from the state of Michigan over to West Virginia, you actually have to fill out a form through the ATF as well, through the eForms website, in order to legally transfer temporarily your suppressor from one location to another. You put dates in there and everything. Sorry, your SBR. Suppressors, again, double check this because this may have changed. We're not lawyers. I feel weird having to say this all the time. Suppressors do not follow that law. And as long as you are legally allowed to have that suppressor in the state or in the municipality where you're going, you do not have to fill out a form to transfer it from state to state temporarily. If you do a permanent move for both SBRs and suppressors, you do have to fill out a form in order to transfer those. So if you move, like physically move from like a house in Michigan to a house in Texas, you have to fill out those forms to properly transfer that device. Again, it is the wet blanket that the ATF is already throwing on us by requiring a tax stamp, but there's also a bunch of rules. You can't just take it around wherever you want. Now, if you take it within your state, you can go anywhere you want within your state, right? Again, if you move, you still have to fill out a form for it, but if you want to go like to your gun range, whether that, like if I'm in the lower peninsula and I want to go to the upper peninsula, I can do that. I can go across the bridge. All that stuff is just fine, right? In theory, unless the bridge has some weird limitations, I don't know. As long as you're in the state of Michigan or whatever state you're in, totally fine. Again, that's just a municipality that doesn't allow you to do that. So the other thing that you want to do that's a big deal, and again, I just say this because I want to make sure nobody ever gets in trouble with it. You must make sure that you have the tax stamp with you at all times, which is kind of a goofy thing because you're like, well, I bought it, I transferred it, I own it, but you also have to prove that it's yours. Now, I don't know how.
Just have a picture of it.
You can't just have a picture of it on your phone. From what I can tell, because I looked it up, you actually have to have a physical copy of your tax stamp.
That's so weird.
I did print off a ton of them. I put them in all my vehicles. Maybe that's not a great idea in case it gets stolen. I mean, I guess you could do a transfer off of it if you wanted to. But I keep it in my vehicles. I keep it in my range bags just in case I have any issues with me. I can present it as needed. Now, I don't know what the laws are from like a local police officers or sheriff's department. Like from my understanding, again, we're not lawyers. My understanding is they would have to call the ATF in order to get you in trouble for having one if you didn't have your tax stamp with you. I have never heard or read anything online where somebody has been harassed over it, but it's better safe than sorry to have it with you at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, those are kind of the wet blanket items that you would have to deal with when having a suppressor. As well as the actual filling out the form itself too. The last thing I'll kind of say is kind of my final thoughts on purchasing a suppressor is, like we talked about earlier, do your own research. This is just to kind of help you get started, to help you have those items that you may not think about, or to give you resources. But do your own research, use multiple sources, not just us, not just YouTube video that you may find out there, not just some lawyer's website, not even a manufacturer's website, but use multiple resources for filling out a Form 4 or Form 1. And if they all kind of say the same thing, there's a really good chance that it's probably the correct way of doing it. And that's what I did. So I went to multiple sources, watched multiple videos, went to multiple lawyer sites, actually went to manufacturer sites, read through the silencer shop information, all of that just to make sure it's correct. Because with anything that is legally fun to navigate, you can get caught up and have problems, and that's not fun. You know, worst case it delays you, like best case it delays you. Worst case you end up with like incorrect information on the federal form, right? And you don't want to mess with that stuff. So I guess that's kind of all my thoughts on that. Tyler, to wrap up from a suppressor perspective on doing a Form 4, did you have any questions, or are you like so done with this topic right now?
I'm ready to buy a suppressor tomorrow if I had the money.
I know. And honestly, like right now, the best time, it used to be like the best time to own a suppressor was the day you got it, or I should say a year ago, or today, right? But now the best, like literally we are living in the golden age, and that's to kill the NFA. We're living in the golden age of suppressor, SBR, SBS ownership because of the quick turnovers.
Yeah,
And I don't foresee that changing anytime soon, but you never know because some bureaucrat fixed it. Some other bureaucrat can ruin the whole thing and
that
make it
is very
awful for
true.
everyone. Right. And they could just do it at the drop of a hat because they choose to in the ATF.
Hmm.
You know, okay, whatever the dude is that fixed the process, the ATF is awesome. But I guarantee you there are people at the ATF that suck, including the outgoing director. Yes, I said it. He sucks. He was awful. And I don't know if you saw the whole thing, Tyler, where they presented him on his retirement. They gave him an 80% lower,
I
which is the
heard
exact
about
stuff
that.
that he was trying to ban. Like, what kind of jerk was that? I mean, seriously.
I
And
heard about
now I'm gonna
that.
get the ATF's gonna visit me tomorrow. I swear.
Exactly. There you go, Philip.
Yep. But anyway, to the people that do my paperwork and that prove it, you guys are awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
But ATF do not sponsor us.
Yeah, please no. Definitely not. But no, I think you did a great job breaking it down, going through all of the steps. It's really fascinating. Of course, there's a lot to take in, but it's also, I guess, not that bad either, per se. So just make sure you go through all of the correct legal steps. And like you said, make sure that you go through the correct channels and do your research. End of the day, do your research. And if you want to, find a lawyer and talk to a lawyer about it if
Yeah,
you really
absolutely.
want to do that.
The other thing I'll add into is if you think about this from a rights perspective of firearms ownership, which we tend to be pretty like you should own anything, right?
Well, the
Uh,
fact that you can only have a suppressor in 42 states really, really irritates me.
yes. So the more suppressors, SBRs, SBSs, NFA items in general that we get out there, the more common these items become,
Yep.
which makes it easier to override any existing legislature down the road, right? Like I think of today, we are a few days off of this recording. Actually, after when you hear the recording, Trump, in theory, unless something goes wrong, will be inaugurated into being the president of the United States, number 47, right? Even with that, getting the NFA overturned in a Republican Congress and Senate and a president is still going to be very difficult
And courts.
in courts, right? Best case scenario, the courts overturn it. But getting these overturned, the more of these that we get out there and the more understanding there is behind these, the better off we are. And that's the
Mhm.
same thing goes for any other firearm that you own. Like go out, if you don't own an AR-15 and you are legally allowed to own one, go buy one. Like get a PSA, like, AR-15 because they're fairly affordable. I think I saw them for like $400, right? Like go get one, even if you're only going to shoot it a few times, and put it in the safe and then, oil it up and not even think about it for a while. Just go buy one because every one we get, every suppressor we get, every firearm we get, the more we get out there, more common use these are
Or
and the
even just get a
easier.
strips lower for like $50.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
you're like really tight for money, that's how I started. I bought two strips lowers, and that was back when they were like 100 $150 a
Yeah,
piece back in 2020 2021. Get a strips lower, and then this way, because what is, once again, not legal advice, this is my own opinion and my personal experience, but that is that's what's actually serialized in an AR-15. It's
yeah,
the lower. That's what I did. So this way I can build on it later on. So at least I have that. So if you're really tight on money, it's $50, man. Plus FFL. So okay, 75, $80,
right.
but still.
Yeah, but then technically you own a AR-15 at that point.
Hmm.
So, and you're good to go. And it's a lot easier to ban the platform than it is to ban the items that go with it.
Hmm.
Though with the assault weapons ban, they banned a lot of really weird things that related to AR-15s. Actually, it's funny after this one, and I forgot to do it today, but Palmetto State Armory, please sponsor us.
I will
They
be
actually,
very grateful for that one too.
yep, they actually have the Squirrel 15 AR-15 lower and a blim version of it, and I'm definitely
Oh,
buying
that's
one.
awesome. My
So
man.
that's right. Anyway, that's all I've got for the suppressor episode. Now, Tyler, what kind of life advice do you have for us?
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to life advice, it actually comes from my mentor. And this is him and I. We spoke about this probably a couple of years ago, and it's biblical, of course, as I'm a pastor, and he's a pastor as well. And it's from the book Iron John. So in that book is a story about a young man, a boy who wants to live a life of adventure. And there is this wild beast that he wants to tame that's in a cage. But in order for him to tame this beast, to get this beast, is to get a key. And in order to get the key is underneath his mom's pillow. He's thinking to himself, how am I going to get this key? And his buddy says, "You need to steal it." He says, "No, I can't do that. I can't do that. That's my mom. She'll kill me." He's like, "Well, if you want this if you want this adventure, if you want to tame this beast, you have to take that key." And that is an illustration or a metaphor of growing up. For any young man listening to this, I know we live in an age where I know for me, even coming from my culture, it's a very high honor and respect culture, and it's really foreign to look at it this way. But the Bible is really clear when it says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife." It is the responsibility of a man, of a woman, of a person to uproot themselves and leave their mother and father. There is no commandment in the Bible where it says, "Moms and dads, you have to let your children go." That's not their responsibility.
Huh.
So, for now, we want them to. The Bible says, yes, to nurture them up in the admonition of the Lord. I get that. But they don't have to do that. They don't have to set their children out to let them fly and be free. It's the responsibility of the person to grow up and actually leave themselves. So that's my advice to you. If you want to grow up, you got to take that initiative. You got to take that first step for that adventure of a lifetime of what is adulthood.
That's interesting. And I think a lot about the like generation that we have right now and the generation prior.
Hmm.
And there was a lot of like that failure to launch for the,
Exactly.
both, especially within men of our generation, or of I should say our generation, men of recent generations, even my generation. I'm a millennial. I identify sometimes more with Gen X, but I am a millennial, and I think millennials, even through now, there's a lot of difficulty of like leaving the nest, right?
Exactly.
And making that decision, to attempt to tame that beast, right? So it's really good advice for individuals, for people that are at home. I understand there's a lot of struggles that have happened lately with the issues around COVID and all that, how finding a house and all those things, right? Like even if you can't own a house on your own, like you're not married, like find some dudes to move in with,
Hmm.
and do that, or find somewhere else to go, and stop playing so many video games too. I play video games to this day, but go out and do stuff and have fun and have adventures.
Exactly.
I was extremely warmed the other day while being frozen at the range. I was at the range. It's real quick. I was at the range and it was just me. I pulled in. It was maybe like 10:30 in the morning on a Saturday, and it was fresh snow. I had just been plowed. I pull into the range. I'm getting unloaded, and I was zeroing in a rifle. I was getting set up. Right. It was just me. And I'm at one bay, and our range has bays on one side and bays on the other, and they face away from each other. So I'm there, and this like four cars pulled up of guys in their 20s, like young 20s, and they all pulled out their firearms, targets, and everything. And they were just having a grand old time, like shooting, like following all the rules of the club, which, sometimes people don't do that when we go. And again, I'm not a huge rule stickler, but there are some things you follow. But they were having a great time. And
Especially
I'm like,
safety.
yeah. And I'm like, dude, like they're getting out, like hanging out with their bros, like being outside, not playing video games, learning a skill, and having a lot of fun. Right. And those are the kind of things that I'm like, all right, that's awesome. Like I really am excited for like this next generation of firearms owners. Right. Like I have hope in that, right? That those groups of individuals are going to continue to find each other and create those social experiences while enjoying firearms at the same time.
Hmm.
That is not my dad advice though.
I was about to say, I know that's not your dad
Yep.
advice. So what about
My
you, Phil? Go
my
for it.
dad advice for today is, and this is actually truly dad advice. If you have children, especially children that are teenagers, make it a point to tell them, if they're a girl, to tell them that they're beautiful, or that they're a boy, to tell them that they are handsome. And it may seem like a weird thing to do. And in a culture like ours that does tend to, like, we want our kids to be smart, right? And we always tell them, hey, you did really well on this assignment, or you're doing well in this class, right? They want them to let them know that they're smart. And that a lot of the value can be derived out of that. But it's also extremely important that people have a good view of themselves, and they get a lot of that out of their father, especially.
Oh yeah,
I've
one hundred
noticed
percent.
I've noticed specifically with my daughter, and I hope she doesn't hear me, but it's true. She's very beautiful, and I make a point to tell her that. And I've been intentionally doing that a lot more lately, and I can tell, and I do it in the morning too. I can tell that it changes the outcome of her day, especially
Hmm.
if just by doing something like that. And obviously, you want to make sure they know that their other skills and everything are really they do a really good job with that stuff. Especially if they surprise you with something, make sure that they know. Don't keep it inside to you. But it's also very important to tell your girls and your boys that that you think they're beautiful and that they're handsome.
Yeah.
Super important, especially as a father, to do so. Mothers for sure. Mothers are listening. Make sure you're doing the same, especially your boys. Tell them that they're handsome. It may
Hmm.
seem weird and they may like whatever, but it does make a difference.
It's important. I know in John Eldridge's book Wild at Heart, and I think he's got his other book, Wild at Heart's for men primarily, and then he has a female version that he wrote with his wife called Captivating, and
Mm,
he really touches on that topic, how with girls, whether, and I'd say not even just teenagers, but definitely young girls as well, just all of them, they have three needs. And one of them is they need to know they are worth pursuing, they're worth fighting for, that they are beautiful, that they are daddy's little princess. Because guess what, dads? Obviously, I'm not a father, but guess what, dads? If they don't get that from you, they're going to find it from somebody else
mm, mm-hmm.
or somewhere else. Could be another guy, it could be an addiction, it could be a bad habit, it could be something else that they are going to find that need for, because they need to know that they are daddy's little princess, whether they are
Yeah,
a child or even a teenager. And same with boys. Same thing. They need to know that they're handsome, that they're strong, that they
rugged.
are
Yeah,
rugged, that they're the wild man, and that they can do it because they want to conquer, because that's just how it is. That's how God created us. So I totally get that. So,
and it's a lot of too. And I think about this a lot because I do have a teenage daughter.
mhm,
And it's a lot of making sure that you are, especially the way that you treat your spouse as well, is really important. But you're
mhm,
demonstrating these things to your daughter so that when she does go to find a mate, a husband later in life, that she knows what to look for and what normal looks like,
exactly.
right? And that is why it is so important to have fathers in the household. And so many statistics are out there that say that when there's a father in the household, that you improve on so many different things, whether
Oh yeah.
it's like, being homeless, being jobless, being abusive, or being abused or being addicted to substances, whatever it may be. Statistics show heavily that having a father in the household, even one that may not be like the best father in the world, because nobody ever is,
Hmm.
having a father in the household that is there is a huge difference in a child's life. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and close out this episode officially. Tyler, I'm super impressed. We made it under an hour, and we ask that you do go ahead and subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. Go ahead and rate, leave comments. It's how we spread the news about what we cover and acceptable accuracy. We don't do a lot of marketing. It's lives intentional. This is a hobby for us and something we like to do. We joke a lot about the whole sponsorship thing, but realistically, it's not something that like we need because it's something that we want to be able to share with everyone around us. Again, that's why we joke about it all the time. But again, like, share, comment, check out our YouTube channel. We've got some videos that we released recently. Anything else I missed, Tyler? Instagram. Don't forget Instagram.
Exactly.
Tyler likes to
Instagram.
post there.
It's true when I feel like it.
Yeah.
And also remember to check out our link tree, link.tree/acceptable accuracy. Of course, email us at acceptableaccuracy@gmail.com. So yeah, that's really about it. So thank you so much everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye bye.